We are live. Martha tells me, but I don't see myself live. So I'm not sure what's going on, Martha. If you could, okay, I'm just going to trust we're live. I'm completely blank on my screen. So let me see if I can see it on the other screen. Nope, I don't see it there either. So I'm operating in the dark, Martha. You're going to have to give me total feedback because my screen isn't working on my computer and my other screen isn't working on the other computer. So I don't know what's going on, but I don't have any tech support here, so we're just going to go with it. So we're talking tonight about rejection. So how many of you would raise your hand and say, both I've dealt with rejection, I hate rejection, it's one of the most painful things I've ever experienced, and I hope I never have to deal with rejection again. How many of you would raise your hand and go there? Yeah, I would. I was rejected a lot as a little kid. I was not a popular kid. I was rejected by my mother. I was rejected by a lot of girls. I was rejected by teams that I wanted to play in. I didn't get to go to parties. So rejection is real. In fact, medical scans that they do now on imaging of your body when you've been rejected shows that rejection affects the body with the imaging that they can see with MRI imaging as much as physical pain. And so the pain of rejection is real. And I don't want to minimize it. It is hard. But one of the things that we have to learn if we're going to become strong women, and if we're going to learn to actually move beyond people pleasing, because one of the things that keeps us stuck in people pleasing ways is this fear of rejection. One of the things that keeps you stuck in your fear of trying new things, of trying to go to college or trying to get a different job or trying to put yourself out there is this fear of rejection. We're so afraid of the pain of rejection, and it's real, believe me, it is real, that we shrink back and we stay small and we don't move forward as God would call us to. You know, rejection is talked about in the Bible a lot, and two stories that I just want to share with you. One is that Leah in Genesis 29, I believe, Leah, remember Jacob was wanting to marry Rachel, and then his father did a bait and switch and he put Leah in the tent after Jacob had too much to drink, at the wedding feast, and he slept with Leah, not realizing that it wasn't really Rachel, and then woke up in the morning and went, that's not the one I wanted to marry. And it was terrible. It was a terrible thing that her father did to her, that he would treat her like nobody would want to marry you anyway, so we have to marry you off in a sneaky way. That's a terrible rejection from your parent. And so Leah knows what that felt like. And then she knew she was not loved. She knew that her husband wanted another woman. How many of you feel that pain? That pain that even if you're not a arranged marriage or in that kind of relationship, you know, like Leah did, that your husband doesn't love you, that he doesn't value you. And that's how Leah felt. And we see her pain through Genesis. And she keeps thinking that if she just does it right, like if I give my husband a son, Rachel couldn't get pregnant. So, okay, now I can do something that she can't do, and I can give my husband a son. And if I give my husband a son, then he will love me. And if I give him a second son, then he will love me. And a third son. And I don't know that he ever loved her. Maybe at the very end, it says that he had a tender heart toward her, but he didn't love her for a long, long, long time. And finally, Leah had to come to terms with something that we all have to face. And that is my worth and my value dependent on whether or not you love me? So if you don't love me, if you reject me, whether you are my parent or whether you are my college, entrance or the job that I applied for, or if you're my children who are adults, or if you're my husband, if you reject me, is that a statement about my value and my worth? And that's what Leah really had to wrestle with in the scriptures. And Jesus himself, in Isaiah 53, it says that he was despised and rejected. Jesus, the most beautiful, worthwhile, worthy, perfect person that was ever put in a human body, was rejected. He was despised. And he felt it. It says he was acquainted with sorrow. His heart broke because the people he wanted to love him did not love him back. And so I want you to understand a couple things. Rejection is real. It happens. You are not going to get through life without some rejection. It is painful. It hurts your heart. It hurts your body. It's personal because people reject us. They reject us as people. I don't want you for my girlfriend. I don't want you for my boyfriend. I don't want you for my mother. I don't want you for my child. I don't want you for a friend. It's very personal and it's very painful, but it also can be professional. We can be rejected from a promotion. We can be rejected because we've applied for a job and we didn't get the job. And so rejection is all throughout life. But if you make it a statement about your personal value and worth, you are going to make the reality of rejection a whole lot more painful than it has to be. You see, Jacob did reject Leah. She wasn't loved as much as he loved Rachel. She wasn't loved at all. But that didn't make Leah unlovable or not valuable as a person, as a woman, as a wife. Just because Jacob didn't love her didn't mean she wasn't lovable, any more than if a mother throws her baby in a trash after giving birth to it doesn't make that baby unlovable because the mother rejected it. The mother rejected it for her own reasons, whether she was overwhelmed, whether she was mentally ill, whether she was ill-equipped, whether she was frightened, for whatever reason, even if she didn't like children. But it has nothing to say about the baby's value or worth intrinsically. It might not be worth much to this mother, but it doesn't mean it's worth nothing at all. And this is the piece that we have to really get in our brain, because when we start to say to ourselves, I'm not worth anything if you don't love me. I'm only valuable if you want me. And if you don't want me, well, then why would I live? That gets us into a very painful place that we're not dealing with rejection very well because we've made it an entire statement about our value and our worth. The reality of life is that sometimes we're going to get rejected. It just is how it is. And it doesn't mean that we're not lovable, beautiful, or wanted. It might mean that we're not lovable, beautiful, or wanted by that person. I don't know how many you dated people before you married them, but I was rejected a couple times of, I don't see us marrying. I don't see us as marriageable material. And I rejected a few guys saying, I don't really see us going any further in this relationship. And it wasn't that those guys or I wasn't worthy or valuable or smart or important. It just meant that you can't marry everybody. And so in order to say yes to somebody, you also have to say no to other people. And again, when we personalize rejection as somehow I've done something wrong, if only I did it all right, they would love me. Leah did it all right. She did everything she could, and she couldn't make someone love her. Love isn't something that you can earn. It's not something that you can get by just making somebody happy all the time. Leah gave her husband what he wanted, sons, and it still didn't make him love her. And so when you're a people pleaser and you give and you give and you bend over backwards trying to do everything that people want you to be, there's absolutely no way you can be all things to all people. And so you are going to disappoint someone. Jesus disappointed people. Some people didn't like him. Believe it or not, not everybody likes chocolate ice cream. I can't imagine why they wouldn't, but not everybody does. So chocolate's rejected by some. Does that mean it's not good? No, but they don't like it. And that's part of where we have to get over personalizing some of this. Now, let me just give you a quick story to illustrate this a little bit. When I wrote my first book, I didn't know what I was doing, but I sent out 12 letters to different publishers about this book idea that I wanted to write with a sample of the book and 3 chapters and all the things that you had to do that. And out of the 12, I didn't know you weren't supposed to do that, but out of the 12, I got 9 rejection letters. 9 rejection letters, one particularly harsh one that said, we don't think you know how to write. We would suggest that you hire a ghostwriter. That was painful, especially for the person who told themselves they couldn't write. And I was taking a big step of faith, even trying to write a book. To have that rejection letter saying, we don't think you can write a book. So forget it. We're not interested. But I also had 8 other rejection letters. And had I just had those 8, or even just that one, probably I would have let that rejection define me as, oh, they're right. I can't write. See, it confirms my limiting belief. I already had that belief when I was 20. I can't write a book. This means I'm not worth it. This means I can't write. This means I'll never get published. This means God doesn't want me to write this book. Didn't mean any of that at all. Thank God, God knew my sensitivity to rejection. And so I had sent out 9 rejections. 3 people wanted the book, which is unheard of in publishing for a first-time unknown author. It was quite a blessing, but I didn't know that at the time. But what I'm saying to you is, if I had just gotten that one rejection, I would have thought to myself, oh, well, that means it. Then it's not going to happen. That means it. I'm finished. That means it. I'm confirmed. I'm not a good writer. But that's not true. Just any more than someone who doesn't like chocolate ice cream means that chocolate ice cream isn't good ice cream. It may not be good for them. And so one of the things that rejection can do for us, as much as it's painful, it's really, really painful, is it can be a gift in some ways. Because if someone rejects us, if I'm the best writer I know how to be, and someone doesn't like that, okay, that's probably good to know, because they're not my audience and I'm not writing for that person, right? Even the best books on Amazon have negative ratings. If someone doesn't like you or what you have to give, whether it's personal or professional, when you stop being you and you try to be what they want, this is called people pleasing. You're trying to, okay, you don't like chocolate ice cream? Well, maybe I could be strawberry ice cream then. Or you don't like strawberry ice cream? Maybe I could be mango sherbet. What do you want? I'll be whatever you want. That is really destructive to you. And it's also destructive to your relationship, because you're not meant to be what they want. You're meant to be what God made you to be. And so when you allow rejection to scare you so much into, I can never be what I'm supposed to be, because what if people don't like it? What if people reject me? Then you'll never be what God calls you to be. Because if you are what God calls you to be, some people will reject you. They did God. They rejected Jesus. So you aren't going to get 100% approval rating. Sometimes we're not going to get very big approval rating at all. If I go to a secular conference and I'm talking like this in biblical terms, I'm going to get rejected. They're not interested in what I have to say. If you were a Democrat and you went to a Republican rally for Trump, you're going to get rejected. They're not going to want to hear what you have to say, and vice versa, right? So if we are strongly about who we are, or who God called us to be, or how we're to be in this world, we are not going to get 100% approval rating. And the more that we can come to understand that and not have these unrealistic expectations of ourselves, that if only I did it right, if only I said it right, if only I could figure out what they need, everybody would accept me, everybody would love me, everybody would think I'm great. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And so understand that rejection is a normal part of life. It is painful. Sometimes it happens just because you're a shining light and people prefer the dark. And so they reject the light. However, there are times when we do things that can cause people to reject us. We do things accidentally. We do things on purpose. People lie to us or we lie to them. We say wicked things about them to others. We gossip. We do hurtful things in our relationships, or they do them to us. And we have to put a boundary there. And God tells us not to totally reject that person, because if they do repent, we want to consider the possibility that they can be a brother or sister in Christ again. Maybe, maybe not. But it begs the question that if you are in relationships a lot where people are rejecting you, you have 2 things to ask yourself. Am I trying to be what everybody wants me to be? And therefore, of course, they're going to reject me eventually, because I can't be that. I'm people pleasing, and I have no real relationships because nobody knows the real me. And they're rejecting the real me because they don't even know the real me, and they keep wanting me to be the pretend me so that I just accommodate them. You see, when you allow yourself, and I've talked about this before, when you allow yourself to be a shiny object. So we'll take the cell phone as a shiny object, okay? And everybody loves a shiny new iPhone, right? It's a shiny object. I love you, my iPhone. You're so wonderful, especially if you're a new one and you're brand new and you've got no smudges on and you work perfect and you've got all the new bells and whistles and you're doing it perfectly. I love you, all right? But when the shiny object gets old, or the shiny object fails to deliver what I expected to deliver in my life all the time, well, then it's discarded for another shiny object. And so when you are a people pleaser in other people's lives, you don't have real relationships with them. You are an object to use. You are there to serve and please them. You're not there to partner with them in mutual, reciprocal, safe and trusting relationships. You're there to be their slave, to be their object, to do what they want, to be at their beck and call. And that's what you're doing to avoid rejection. Well, I have to do that. If I don't do that, they'll reject me. Maybe so, because maybe you're just the shiny object. And when the shiny object doesn't want to be a shiny object anymore and says, wait a minute, ouch, stop. That hurt when you just threw me on the table. I don't like that. Please treat me nicer. I'm going to be like, who do you think you are, shiny object? Stop talking to me that way. You're just an object, right? And that's what happens when you are a compulsive people pleaser. Now, we just had this challenge moving beyond people pleasing, moving beyond different things, moving beyond our negative thoughts, like I'm not worth it, moving beyond our negative expectations. Everybody should love me, moving beyond our fear of failure, and moving beyond people pleasing and understanding that you can be a people pleaser. I love to please you. That's why I'm doing this free Facebook. I love to make you happy. I love to serve. I love to give. And when I can't, and if I had to cancel this, or if I had to say I can't do this, I'm not afraid of rejection. If you don't like it, okay, that's okay with me. I might not like it either if I were attending a class and somebody had to cancel it. It's okay. You see, pleasing people is fine as long as you're not doing it compulsively, afraid to say no. When you're just bowing into everybody in order for them to not reject you, in order for them to like you, in order for them to want you, then you set yourself up to be used, abused, and controlled. Because if I can control you by rejecting you, if I can manipulate you by the fear of rejecting you, well, then you're going to do whatever I want. I could have you eating out of my hand. If you want my approval so much that a look of disapproval or disdain or rejection can make you beg me, please, please, please don't leave me, I'll do what you want. And you might not say that, but that's what you're doing. You become the object of the other person. And let me just say this, friend, that is not good for you, but it's also not good for the other person. It's not good for people to use other people selfishly and abusively and objectively as if they don't matter. I was just talking to a woman today about the possibility of coaching with someone in my team. And I said, have you ever asked your husband, don't my feelings matter too? Doesn't my perspective matter too? She says, I've never asked him that. And I said, well, why not? I'm afraid it doesn't. Okay, if it doesn't, what does that tell you? You're not a person to him. You're a wife, a role, a wife, a maid, a mother, a sex object. That's it. Is that what you want to be? Is that just the kind of relationship that you want, that you're objectified into these roles, but that your feelings, your desires, your goals, your dreams don't matter? That you're just an object to serve, to be used up and thrown away, but not a person to love? That's not all God's intention for you. That wasn't who Jesus was. He served, he loved, but he also had real relationships, and he wasn't a people pleaser. There were many times in scriptures that he disappointed people. He didn't do what they wanted. He didn't do what the Pharisees wanted. He didn't even do what his own disciples wanted sometimes, because he knew what God wanted him to do. And that's what he was going to do. And he had God to please and not everybody else. And when you please God, there are going to be times that other people are going to be unhappy with you. That's just reality. And so we have to stop being, one, so afraid of the pain. There is pain there. We have to stop being so afraid that we're not willing to do it. You know, when I was a kid, I was so afraid of the pain of rejection because I was rejected. You know, I wasn't popular. I wasn't invited to the parties. I wasn't, and so I would try to be like everybody else. Like I would try to copy the popular kids, and I would try to imitate their laugh and say the same jokes. And it was just fake. It wasn't who I was. I didn't even know who I was. I was just a little kid. But I didn't know who I was, but I was so anxious about being accepted that I didn't even have space to figure out who I was, because who I was obviously wasn't good enough, obviously wasn't important enough to have friends. And so I kept thinking, well, if I could be like them, then I would be loved, then I would be accepted, then I would be important. But that doesn't work because you're not really you. And so even if they like whoever you create, the fake persona, it's not real. And so you even still can't feel loved because you know that the person they think you are isn't who you are. You're just performing. And so I would really encourage you to stop pretending. Stop pretending. Be your best self. So don't act like a jerk and expect that you won't get rejected. If you act like a jerk and you tell people off and you're just, rude and abusive and degrading and harsh and mean, people aren't going to like you. Most people are not going to like you. All right. They're not going to want to be around you. So be the best you can be. And you will attract people to you who like you for you. And if they don't like you, people didn't like Jesus. If they don't like you for you, okay, they don't like chocolate ice cream. They don't like roses. That doesn't mean roses are bad. It doesn't mean chocolate ice cream isn't tasty. It just means that those people don't like that. Some people don't like people who have strong ideas on things, especially women. You have to decide what kind of woman God's made you to be and be that. Shine bright. Don't let your candle be put under a bushel, Jesus says. Let your light shine so that people might see who God made you to be. And if you're going to do that, you have to face the fear of rejection. You have to let go mentally of the lies that say, if you're rejected, something's wrong with you. You did something wrong. You might not have done anything wrong, and you still might be rejected. You might be doing everything right, and you still might be rejected. Jesus was. So don't put that on yourself. Be the best version of yourself. Move out into the world. Serve people, love people, hold people accountable, have real relationships with people. And if you get rejected in the process, deal with your pain. It's real. Jesus cried, "Oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, I would have gathered you together, but you would not." He cried. It's okay to cry. Rejection hurts. It's sad, but it is not a statement about your value or your worth. One more thing about rejection, and I'll answer your questions. Rejection may be a blessing. Rejection may be a blessing because sometimes you're venturing into something that God doesn't want you to do. So let's say you want to be a model, right? And you want to go into modeling, and maybe you have the attributes to be a model, and you try out and you get rejected. Or you want to go to be American Idol, and you go there and you get rejected. First of all, there's a lot of amazing singers and talent on these shows that don't get first place, right? So somebody's going to lose because only one person wins. That doesn't mean you're not good at that. But it might mean that God has a different purpose for you. If you don't get into the school you want to get into, you don't get on the sports team that you want to, you don't get the job you're wanting, you don't get to marry the person you thought you were going to marry. Sometimes that's a blessing because right in that moment, you're not listening to God or you're not making the best decisions. And so God will orchestrate circumstances to turn you into a different direction. And he may do that through rejection, not because he wants you to be hurt or harmed, but because he wants to stop you dead in your tracks. And so the door closes. The door closes. And again, it's not a statement about your value or your worth. And so if you can begin to see it that way, wow, this door closed, God. Do I keep knocking? All right, so 9 doors closed. This book didn't want me. Thank God there were 3 people who did, or I might have not kept knocking because of my own fear of rejection. But sometimes rejection can take you in a different direction that you would have never gone in had you not faced that rejection to begin with. I remember reading one of my favorite novels of all time is, and I can't think of her name, Catherine something, who wrote the book, The Help. And she, before that book got published, and it was a great movie, I think she got rejected over 80 times. So I'm thinking I got rejected 9 times for my first book. She got rejected over 80 times. She didn't get any 3 people who said they wanted the book. But after each rejection, it taught her something, okay? It didn't teach her that this is a bad book. It taught her that she could learn to write it better. She could write it better. There were always constructive criticisms on the rejection notice. This is a great book, but this is what you could do. This is how you could make this tighter. This is how you could make this a better story. And she didn't let that discourage her. And it went on to become a great book and a great bestseller and a great movie. And so sometimes God allows rejection in our life to sharpen us, to push ourselves a little harder to do his work and not settle for something that might have been just good enough. And so I want to just make myself available to answer your questions. I do want to say to you one more thing. I've been working with a group of people in a different group this last week on our Moving Beyond Challenge. You might have been a part of that group, you might not have. We did 5 days of challenges. We did Moving Beyond Overwhelm, Moving Beyond Negative Thoughts, Moving Beyond Unrealistic Expectations, Moving on Beyond Our Fear of Failure, and Moving Beyond People Pleasing. And I talked with them in this private Facebook group all last week about these things, and then invited them to join a course that I offer only once a year called Moving Beyond People Pleasing. And so that course is open this whole week if you want to join up for it, but it's on sale at $100 off, and that sale ends tonight. So you can pay the regular price, which is $147 up to Friday. But if I were you and you're thinking about it and you know you're a card-carrying people pleaser, you might want to take the class at $47. We did it from COVID as a COVID sale for that group, and I'm offering it to you guys too. But if you would like to take that class, the link for it is leslievernick.com/people pleasing. I think it's people pleasing course. Let me make sure, I better check. I never remember what these things are. So it's called people pleasing course. Yeah, leslievernick.com people pleasing course, and it's $100 off, so it's only $47. We're going to have a private Facebook group for this course. I'll be in there going through some of the modules with you on a Facebook Live, answering some of your questions. So if you'd like some extra learning this summer, so that by the time the fall comes, you're feeling much more equipped with your relationships and your relationship skills, and learning how to find yourself, and learning why you're so afraid of rejection, why you're so bowing into the fear of man. We talk a lot about in that module 1, why, and then the skills of how to speak up for yourself, how to set boundaries, and then also how to find the woman that God called you to be. If that's something that really resonates with you, just check out the course. You can go to that link and it'll give you all the information about it. And it's $100 off until midnight tonight. And then tomorrow you can buy it too, but you will spend $100 more for it. So it'll be $147 up till Friday, and then we'll close the course. All right, so I would love to see you there. But right now, I'm going to just answer some questions for you. So let me find it. Let me find Martha's questions. Rejection from the children I raised feels like the worst. How do I move on while they see me as the enemy? I am heartbroken. So this is a problem that we've talked about a lot. So first of all, there's rejection at different levels. All right. So sometimes our children don't want to be our best friends in adulthood. They still want to be our children. They still want to gather together as a family for Christmas or whatever, but they don't want to hang out a lot. They don't want to be our best buddies. They don't want to confide in us. And that hurts too. That rejection hurts, especially if we want that friendship from them and they don't want that back. But I think what this person is talking about is cut off rejection. Like, you are the enemy because you divorced my father, or because you did something I disapproved of. I don't want anything to do with you. And it's interesting how we've raised our adult children from children, and we have to take some responsibility in raising them, that somehow we have raised them to expect perfection from us. And that when we step out of line of what they think is the perfect mother, this is going back to this object now. You were the shiny object mother. You were the example of the perfect mom. You were the example of the virtuous Christian woman, and you failed because you've divorced dad or you've separated. Shame on you. I'm not having anything to do with you until you turn around. And so we have to take some responsibility for giving our children the impression that that was an okay way to look at us, that we were such a good mother, such an overfunctioner, did everything for our kids, that when we couldn't anymore, or when we realized that that wasn't healthy, or we stopped pretending, or we just had a breakdown because we couldn't handle it anymore. Now our kids can't take the reality that we're just a person. We're a person with feelings. We're a person with a heart that's broken. We were supposed to last forever as a shiny object. And when we can't and don't, they don't understand it, because that's what a mom or a wife is supposed to do, right? And so I think helping yourself to understand maybe part of the ways that your children have come to see you might be a big help to you to say, okay, how might I help them see me different? And I think humility is always a great start to say, I can understand why you're so angry with me. I can understand why you think I should just keep sucking it up, because I always have, except for I'm learning that wasn't great. That wasn't a great idea. For me to pretend everything was fine for 40 years when it really wasn't, didn't help you, didn't help dad, didn't help me, didn't help our marriage. And I'm sorry that I just couldn't hold it together anymore, but I can't. And I don't think God wants me to lie and pretend just so that everybody can pretend that everything's fine when it really is rotten bones underneath. It's like a chocolate cake that's on top of ant poison or rat poison. I'm not going to do that anymore. There is no substance to this marriage. There is no trust or safety to this marriage. And I'm not going to pretend otherwise. And I'm sorry that disappoints you, but I don't think God's asking me to lie and pretend. And I think if you can learn how to phrase things, not, it's not about you, I'm so hurt you've rejected me, but hey, I think I've misrepresented who I am to you. I am not the superwoman with a cape who can fix everything. And I sort of acted that way in our family. And when I couldn't, you've blamed me for failing. And so I think that's part of what happens, at least in my audience, with women who have been taught that the ideal Christian woman bears all things, believes all things, perseveres all things, forbears all things, doesn't have any boundaries, and always has a smiling face and accommodates everyone. And when you just can't anymore, or you're just too rip-roaring mad to do it, or you're too depressed to function, then they're not happy with you because the shiny object has broken. And they're about to discard you and say, well, I don't need you. If you're not going to be there for me and do everything I want, why would I have you in my life? Because you haven't been a person ever in their life. And so if you are a mom of young children, I would encourage you to change that pattern right now. And you may need my course in order to learn how to do it. All right, let's one more thing. I think when our children reject us, it is one of the most painful rejections. And let me just say that I think that sometimes in those moments, we have the privilege to enter into the sufferings of Christ because we reject him too. We are his children. We are God's children. God has created us to be his family. And when people reject God, he's been a perfect parent. He's been the perfect one. And we still reject him because we want to treat him as an object too, right? Well, God, you didn't answer my prayer. You didn't do this for me. You didn't do that for me. You didn't help me with this. Why should I believe in you? Right? And so we've even treated God as an object. And when you fail me, God, well, then I don't have anything to do with you. I don't believe in you because you didn't come through for me because I'm the object. Hold on, I gotta let go of the phone. You're the object instead of God says, I'm a personality, I'm a spirit, I want a relationship with you. And so I think when we face that from our children, we can enter into the sufferings of Christ and the sufferings of God the Father in perhaps a way that you couldn't before. And you can really come close to the heart of God in those moments and understand that he understands what it feels like to be rejected. And he was the perfect parent. And yet we as his children saw him as the shiny object. I want you to do this for me, God. I want you to do that for me, God. And I know this is your will and you should do this for me. And if you don't, I'm not going to have anything to do with you then. Right? And that's sort of the attitude our kids have. And that's sometimes the attitude that we have toward God. All right, let's see. This one thing that makes it hard for me is to leave my husband. I don't want to make him feel unlovable. Is this correct thinking? No, because first of all, you can't make someone feel unlovable. That's not within your power to do, right? I mean, you can hurt people with your words, but I don't think Jesus felt unlovable. He might have felt unloved, but he didn't feel unlovable. He knew he was lovable. All right. So we can't make someone feel something that's not already in them to begin with. So that's his work to do. But I also think that as women, when we need to talk to someone about the breakdown of a relationship, we can be kind and still clear and firm. And I think we can say, I think you can say to your husband, I don't know why you're thinking of leaving. Obviously you're saying I still love him or I don't want him to feel unlovable. So I think there's plenty of times that we love people. I love you, love our enemy even, but I can't trust you to live with you because you're not safe, because you are doing things that are dangerous, that you're harmful to me and the kids. And I can't live that way. I won't live that way. That doesn't mean I don't love you. It doesn't mean I won't pray for you. It doesn't mean that I won't do you good if I have the opportunity to do it, but I can't have a relationship with you in which you're close to me and you have the ability to harm me and the kids continuously. I won't let you do that. That's not good for me, but it's also not good for you. And I love you enough. Just like, I think I don't know why we can't get this as women. If your toddler was punching you in the mouth because they were angry, would you love them so much that you wouldn't stop them? Or would you love them enough to stop them and say, this isn't not only good for me, this is not acceptable behavior for you. I'm not letting you do this. right? That's what we would do to love our children. We would teach them what is acceptable and what isn't acceptable. And we can't treat our husbands that way. They're not children. But I think when we get goofed up in our mind that it's unloving to say, no, I'm not putting up with this, it's not. I mean, the way we say things can be unloving, but it can be just like if your kid smacked you in the mouth, you could smack them back in the mouth and that would be unloving. But for you to stop them from smacking you and saying, this isn't allowed, I'm not going to put up with this, to your child is loving. And the same with your husband. This isn't okay with me. And I can't live with you if you continue to act this way. I think that can be one of the most loving things you can say to someone. Speak the truth to them. Is being dismissed by someone the same as rejection? It could be. I think what they're saying is, I reject your feelings, I reject your thoughts, I reject your separateness. I think there's this myth, more from men than women, that when we get married, your whole life should revolve around making me happy, and that my feelings and my wants and my desires are the penultimate of what's right. And if you dissent or you disagree or you have that's not good and that's not important and that's disrespectful to me as the man, as the husband. So in other words, I want to be the God of this family and I want to be worshiped, the king of the castle, all those kind of fantasies that we unwittingly feed in our Christian teaching about husband-wife relationship. And maybe it's not quite so bad anymore. I don't know. I know when I was getting married and I was in the church and as a young wife, The Excellent Wife and all these books about, pretty much revolving your whole self around serving and making your husband happy was basically your entire life. And that's all you should ever want. And I don't know that that's what God says about women. I don't think that's all. In fact, the Proverbs 31 woman had quite a robust life, didn't she? She was married and she had children, but she was resourceful. She was involved in her community. She helped the poor. She was a seamstress. She had her own money. She was pretty busy and she was pretty respected as a woman. And it said strength and dignity were her clothing. And she smiled at the future unafraid. And her husband trusted her to do him good, not harm, all the days of his life. He didn't just treat her as an object. She was a person he admired. And I think that's a picture of marriage, that your husband admires you and you admire him. It's not just I use you and use me to get us what we want, but that we uphold and support the person that God's made you to be in marriage and help you to be all that you're to be. All right. My feelings were not accepted by my husband. I married him believing God would give me a love for him. Now, 39 years later, I found out that husband has been in a sexual addiction. But now I feel like my adult kids are rejecting me for leaving my husband. It's beyond painful. When you feel your rejections for your kids, how do I handle my painful emotions? Well, first of all, I want you to understand that it is beyond painful. And it's so unfair. Rejection is unfair, often. It wasn't fair for Jesus to be rejected by the Pharisees, by the religious leaders. He was the Messiah, and he was rejected. So I want you to understand that rejection isn't fair. It's not always based on truth. It's a power struggle in some ways to say, if you won't do what I want in the way I want, especially with adult children or in relationships, then I'm going to reject you. Then I don't want anything to do with you. And so basically it's a way of controlling you to be the people pleaser. And we've talked about that in the class. We'll really unpack all of that for you biblically about what's wrong with that. The fear of man is a snare. And so when we crave relationships so much from certain people that we give them the power to decide how that relationship is to be. So if I want to abuse you, I'm going to abuse you. And if you speak up, if I want to have a sex addiction, I'm going to have a sex addiction. If you speak up, I'm going to reject you and make you look like the bad guy. And that's what they do. All right. If I reject this iPhone because it's not cooperating with my agenda, it's going to be the bad guy, not me. Right. And so I think it's so important that we band together as other women. And so one of the ways that we deal with rejection is that we talk to other women who have been rejected in those ways. And we look at that woman and say, oh my gosh, you're a lovely woman. You're smart, you're beautiful, you're giving, you're intelligent. I can't believe your husband wouldn't love you. I mean, we look at some of the movie stars that get rejected. Amazing, attractive women who are talented and bright, and their husbands go cheat on them. They go have an adulterous affair. They're convicted of sexual crime or whatever they are. I mean, it's not about you that they act that way. Those are their issues, and we all have our issues. So don't hear me say all men have issues and women don't have issues. We all have our issues. We are all broken, the Bible says. We are all sinful. It's not a matter of he has issues and you don't. It's a matter of, can you own your issues, and can he own his issues? Can you humbly repent of those issues? Can you ask God to help you? Are you willing to work on them in a sense of community? So rejection can help, but having other people around you that you can talk to about your rejection, about your hurt, helps you. But I think the other thing that's really important, write out your feelings, all the feelings that you have when you're rejected. When I get rejected by someone or somebody, I lost a really, really good friend a number of years ago. We had a difference about something, and it was a serious difference, a serious hurt. And I talked to her about it, and basically her response was to reject me, just cut me right out of her life. And it was very painful. And I understand there was no figuring out how to fix this, because there was something she had done and she didn't want to look at it. She didn't want to deal with it. She didn't want to own it. And we haven't talked for a number of years. And that was hard. It was a rejection of someone who was a dear friend for over 20 years. So I think that it happens in life. The Bible tells us it happens in life. So when you feel that rejection, write out your feelings. I must have written her 50 letters. Didn't send them, but I wrote them out of all my hurt, all my whys, all my questions about why she did what she did, all of those kind of things. And I would talk with it to people. I would ask them for prayer. So I legitimized, yes, I'm hurt. I'm hurt. I didn't try to just be, I'm Leslie Vernick. I don't feel any hurt. Of course I felt hurt. I was in a small group with other women that I meet with once a year, and I'm like, snot's just pouring out of my nose. I'm crying so hard. That's how it hurts. Rejection hurts, right? So it's okay. Feel your feelings. Don't feel like you've got a good woman or a strong, godly woman doesn't feel her feelings. Jesus was sweating drops of blood when he was feeling certain feelings, right? He was going to be rejected by the people in a very harsh way by going to the cross. He felt it. He felt it ahead of time. And he said, I'm not sure I want to feel this. So let yourself feel your feelings, validate it. But here's where I think it's really important, that you've got to step back. You got to catch the lies, because Satan would love for you to feel worthless, helpless, and like garbage when you're rejected. That's not true. Rejection itself is painful enough, but it doesn't mean you're worthless, garbage, unlovable, washed up. Doesn't mean any of that. And so maybe not having your kids in your life right now, maybe not having your grandkids in your life right now is extremely painful, but maybe it's a season for you right now to build some other friendships, to build some new relationships in your life. If you were so busy with your grandkids and so busy with your adult children that you didn't have the time to nourish other adult friendships with other women, maybe you would miss out on something that you need, that God knows you need. And so maybe for your season right now, you don't know what your kids are going to do. You don't know what they're going to do 2 years from now, 3 years from now. We've had so many stories of reconciliation of those kind of things once your kids have kids and once they begin to mature a little bit inside. And you stay healthy and you get healthier. But maybe this is a season for you to find some new girlfriends, for you to develop some healthy female friendships, for you to live your life besides just being a mom and a wife, for you to find something that God has for you to do, ways that you can give back to others. There are plenty of lonely people that you can minister to and love on who also feel rejected. And you can do that instead of just sitting alone mourning the loss of your family. That yes, you can do that. There's a season for that. There's a time to mourn and there's a time to build. There's a time to grieve and there's a time to move on from grieving. And so make sure you don't get stuck in that place. You can do both and. How can you repair relationships with my children if I was told to have no contact? Should I send a letter? So I think you have to ask yourself why you were told to have no contact. Was there something that you were doing that was manipulative or destructive? Was there something that you were doing that wasn't respecting their boundaries? Because usually people don't say to have no contact until they've told you a number of times other ways that they're unhappy with you in some way. So I think you got to own, why did it come to such a strong boundary as I'm putting the door shut and I'm putting a padlock on it? That's no contact, right? And I'm not answering the door ever. So I think you can own that. And it might be a letter of apology, a letter of contrition of if I haven't, not if I haven't respected your boundaries. I hadn't respected your boundaries. I didn't even understand what boundaries were. I didn't know some things that I'm learning now. And so talk about yourself. And we talk a lot about that in people pleasing. How do you make these beginning changes to the relationship dance? What kind of words do you use? How do you start? And so that may help you to write a letter. And again, I think you need to respect their boundaries. If they don't want to hear it, then you wait and you pray and you trust God that He will bring it in due season, and you keep your heart open. I know I didn't have any contact with my mother at all. So here I was an adult child. I had no contact with my mother for good reason. She was, harsh and abusive, and she was very scary to me and my kids. Even my husband was scared of her. And we didn't have any contact with her for 15 years. No contact. But during that time, I kept praying for her. I kept asking God to help me to forgive her, to not be scared of her, to love her as an enemy, to help honor her as my mother. And if I were to ever have contact with her again, how was I going to handle my side of the street? So as an adult child, I didn't have any contact with my mother for all that time. Didn't reject her so much as I had to stay safe from her. Had she not behaved in certain ways, I might not have had to put that boundary down, but she didn't. Now, I'm not saying that's been your situation, but for 15 years, we didn't have any contact. She didn't get a relationship with my kids. She didn't want one. But we did have a very sweet 2 years at the end. But had I not done my work, and maybe had she not had that season of what's it like to not have anybody to beat up on, maybe she wouldn't have been able to then come around at the end. And actually, as she was dying of lung cancer, live the most alive, vibrant life I've ever seen her live. Not in that she was doing all kinds of stuff, but she was honest and she was real and she was lovable because she was too weak to be mean. Right? And so I'm not saying that's you at all, but don't think it's forever. It may not be forever. It may be for a year. It may be for 2 years. It may be for a longer time. But meanwhile, do your work, build your life. Don't keep your life so circled on just your family. The reality is, ladies, that most of us will be widows. Even if you're not divorced, most of us will be widows, right? And so if your husband dies suddenly, if you go home today and he's in his chair with a heart attack or a stroke, dead, do you have a life? Do you have a life apart from being a wife and a mom of adult children? Do you have girlfriends that you could call that could support you? Do you have a church community that's robust that you're involved in? Are you doing work somewhere, volunteering, being involved, contributing somewhere where you have a life? Or is your whole life wrapped up here? And if he dies, your whole life dies. So maybe this is a season for you, as painful as the rejection is, for you to build your life so that when you enter back into your children's life, you're not overly dependent on them to create your life for you. I can't tell you the number of women that I talk to where their mothers depend on them to build their life. I'm so lonely. Dad died. I don't have anything to do. And they're dependent on their adult children to make their life work. It's your job to make your life work. You want to have a relationship with your adult children. Yes, we all do. But maybe this is a season for you to take ownership of your life and make it something you want it to be. Okay. Martha's reminding me to remind you, our course starts. You can start now. You can take it now. You can also start on Friday. When it ends, you can't buy it anymore. But if you buy it now before midnight tonight, you get it for $100 off. So she just wants to remind you because I don't know about you, but like I was buying hair care today, Bumble and Bumble. I buy their like hair gel and it was 25% off. And I hate paying full price. And so it was 25% off today. And before I got on here, I go, I got to remember to get on there because it closes at midnight Eastern time. And if I don't get my 25% off, I'm not going to buy the stuff. And so we all love a sale. And I have never, ever in the 5 years I've had this course, ever put it on sale. I hardly ever put anything on sale. So this is a big sale, $100 off this course. I have never done. I don't know if I'll ever do it again. So if it appeals to you to learn to be a strong woman and not a people pleaser, I would highly encourage you to check out the sales page at the lesliebernick.com/people pleasing course, just to read about it, see what you get. There's an ebook that goes with it on people pleasing. There's probably 12 to 18 videos that you can watch. There's transcripts. So if English isn't your first language, you can actually read, or you can print out the transcripts and read it as I'm doing the video, so you can take notes and circle it. I mean, it's a robust course that will really help you on this whole people pleasing, not just learn skills, but understand what's going on inside that keeps you so gripped in fear. the fear of rejection, the fear of failure, the fear of abandonment. Those are biggies. All right. My oldest son has rejected me and will have nothing to do with me because he feels that I favored his stepfather, my second husband, over him. And he hasn't spoken to me much in the last 7 years. And he's rejected every attempt that I've made to communicate with him. And I'm just wondering what is the best way to continue. Also, I have 3 other children with my second husband. That is so hard. And we were just talking about this in another group I'm in. Because children from a first marriage, when you get married in a second marriage and have more children, often feel like a throwaway child, especially if the stepfather kind of creates that division with my kids and you, and you're not really a part of our family. You're sort of the bother, where you're the reminder of the other marriage. And if you didn't stand up for your child, or if you sided with your husband over your son, he has built up a lot of hurt and resentment over that. And probably at this point, there's not a whole lot you're going to do. That's his issue to work on now. You can't fix his issue of resentment and bitterness toward you or toward his father for not stepping in and helping him be loved or whatever it is. But I think you could apologize for it. You could say, I've become aware that I remember working with a woman who's let her second husband sexually abuse her children. And she was in therapy with me, and she was just sick as she was getting healthier and healthier. She divorced that second husband, and her kids were adults now. And her kids were starting to show some real, especially one of them, some real issues with what happened to her as a kid. And she was so despondent. I can't hardly forgive myself for not being strong enough to step in and protect my daughters. What's wrong with me? And so, we worked on that, but she had some repair work to do with her children. And she did. And to her credit, her children were able to forgive her. And she said, I can't do your work now. There was damage done. I can't do your work. You've got to do your work. And they did. They went into therapy and did their work. And she paid it for it. She said, I wasn't strong enough to stick up for you then, but I am strong enough to work harder and extra to pay for your therapy now. And that's what I want to do. If you want to get help, I can't fix this for you. It's your job to fix this. So by entering into that understanding humbly and offering to make some amends or repairs that you could, that might go a long way into opening the conversation. What do you do if you're already stuck in the mourning stage and you are trying to get back up? Great question. And I think that many times we get stuck in the mourning stage because we're not willing to accept reality. And so when we've been rejected or a relationship dies, mourning, you're mourning something, the loss of relationship. There has to come a place when you're mourning, even if someone died, literally died, there comes a place in time where you have to accept that this is reality. Now, mentally, we know it's reality. Like if someone were in a car crash or you came home and you found your husband dead on the couch and he's dead, you sort of accept it like, oh my gosh, he's dead. It's not like you're saying he's still alive. It's not like you're propping him up on the couch and watching TV together. You're not that crazy. But there's something emotionally that says, I can't believe it. I can't believe it. I can't believe it. There's that piece of, I can't believe this is where I'm at. I never expected my life to be this way. I can't believe it. I can't believe it. And so we're in this non-acceptance emotional place. Intellectually, we've accepted it, but emotionally, we're not accepting it. Like, this is not okay. This is not okay. And because it's not okay, we're resisting the truth emotionally. We're resisting it. So we're crying and we're wailing and we're doing all we have to do to come to a place where we can accept it. Right? And that takes people time. There is no way you're going to do that in 24 hours, right? So for some people, it takes months. Some people, it takes longer. And you're wailing and you're crying and you're whatever boo-hooing and you're complaining and whatever the lament psalms are full of it, right? So don't beat yourself up. That's part of our humanity. But there's sooner or later, you have to come to a place where this is my life. This isn't where I wanted it to be. This isn't where I imagined it to be. This is what I would have wished it to be, but this is where it is. My husband's gone, or I don't have a relationship with my adult children. Now what? And here's, especially when someone dies, we have a hard time making a life for ourselves because we sort of feel guilty, like, oh, I could really live without this person. Like, oh, especially when it's a child that died, like, oh, I can laugh again. I can have fun again. I shouldn't be able to because this should be so awful that I can never rebuild my life. And that's just not true, but we kind of feel disloyal if we move on and have a life. But there's a time where you come to accept that I am sad. I'm never not going to be sad, but I can't go back. I can't go back and have what I can't have. So now what am I going to do with what I do have? And how am I going to value the present? And how am I going to value the gifts of the present? My health, other people that are in relationship with me that do love me and value me, my job, opportunities that I have to serve and give and do kingdom work. And as you begin to accept what you don't have and begin to see what you still do have, you can begin to make a new life. And that is a new normal that kind of takes some time, but you can do it. But don't feel disloyal for doing it. We tend to kind of give ourselves a guilt trip, like, ooh, this means I didn't miss my children. It doesn't mean any of that. It just means that I'm accepting reality for now. Just like if you were thrown in a German concentration camp or thrown into a Christian concentration camp because you're a Christian. Okay, we have to accept here's we are. How do we build a life here? Doesn't mean we want to stay here forever, but we don't want to stay in our cell wishing we were somewhere else. We've got to build a life where we are and then see what God does. And so I would just encourage you to begin to use that Ecclesiastes passage. There's a time for mourning, there's a time to tear down, and there's a time to build up. And so maybe it's time to make a transition for yourself here. How can I set boundaries with my husband to protect myself against rejection? I don't know that you can control his rejection of you, okay? You can't control that because he may reject you even if you have tons of boundaries, right? So it's not that you can protect yourself against rejection. Rejection happens. It's what you do with rejection, all right? So people aren't going to like you. People aren't going to want to be with you. And sometimes if you're a typical people pleaser or if you've let yourself be objectified, the more boundaries you start to set up, you will get rejected because now you're not being as compliant. Now you're not doing what they want. So you're done being a shiny object in their life and they're going to find someone different who will, right? So you don't really have a relationship with that person. So you're not protecting yourself against rejection, but what you are protecting yourself against is the lies of rejection, okay? And the lies of rejection are this, that because you're rejected, you did something wrong. That may not be true. Jesus never did anything wrong and he was rejected. The lies of rejection are, if you're rejected, that means you're not lovable. That's not true. It may be true that this person doesn't love you anymore, never did love you, loved you as a shiny object, but not as a person. That may be true, but it doesn't mean that you're not worth loving or that you're not lovable. So you need to begin to do your own work around the lies that you've believed around rejection that have kept you captured, as a people pleaser because you're so afraid of rejection. Again, rejection's no picnic. But it doesn't mean all those things that we tell it ourselves that it means. I did something wrong. There's something wrong with me. I'm not good enough. I'm not lovable enough. There's something in me that people hate. That may not be true at all. It's not true for Jesus. It may not be true for you. It wasn't true for Leah. But rejection is a reality of life, and it does hurt us. How is the best way to handle rejection based on lies told to a person about me? I don't have the desire to get into defending myself. So how do you handle a situation like that? Well, if someone has rejected you based on lies, then and if you don't have the energy to really talk to them about that, then I would say that relationship isn't all that important to you, which is fine. I've done the same thing. I'm not about to, every person who says negative things about me on the internet, I'm not about to put any energy into defending myself or explaining myself. It doesn't matter. You can think what you want to think, right? So I think, don't feel guilt trip about that. But if that relationship is important to you and they're believing lies, I might just confront them on that. I might just say, I don't understand. I thought we had a good relationship. And why would you end our friendship without ever talking to me about what you heard was true? So I would confront not necessarily the lie itself, but the reality that they believed someone else's word over even checking it out with you. And if they did do that, I would ask myself, what kind of friend are they after all, right? So again, rejection can be something we learn too. Like maybe this person isn't as good of a friend as I thought. Maybe they're not a friend at all. All right. My mother is gone. I did not have a good relationship with her. When I was still living at home, I did some things that were bad. I did not realize that she was aware of what was going on. How do I move on with this? So I would do a letter to your mom, and I would just write to her in the most humble, contrite, self-aware way that you can. And maybe if you do this at her gravesite, or you do this, with a candle, do it with your emotions and your senses involved. Do the writing, talk to her, and just tell her you're sorry. Tell her you're sorry. That you were stupid. You didn't know. You didn't know what you know now. And she knows that now. She knows that now. But you didn't know that. And just clear the air. And sometimes if you sit with that and actually do that exercise, so you speak to someone who you can't really speak to, whether they're still alive or not alive, it's not safe to speak to, or it's not possible to speak to them because they are dead, or they live somewhere else, or they're in another relationship that would cause them pain if you did that, right? I remember working with a man who had sexually abused some women, and for him to go to them and talk to them would have been very painful for those women, and he didn't think that was good for them. And so he did it just his way, this way, and wrote apology letters, made amends, donated some money to victims of sexual abuse so that he could help other women, not personally, but financially, do what they needed to do to get well. And so I think those are things we can do to try to make amends and heal from that and show that we're truly remorseful. But one other thing that you might want to think about is sometimes it's helpful just to sit with that for a little bit, like after you've done, and just sit with it for a minute and just imagine what your mother might say back to you from this place now. Is she seeing you be humble and contrite and remorseful? And maybe as she's experienced wisdom, as she's gone into eternity, what might she say back to you? Oftentimes you'll hear something very healing back in your spirit. And I would just go with that. All right. Is the prodigal story an enabling story? I'm not sure if I'm asking this correctly. I don't know what you mean by that. So the prodigal son was an enabling son. He was given his inheritance. He asked for it early. That was unheard of in Jewish culture, but the Jewish father decided to give it to him, and he went off and squandered it. And then when he came back and asked for the position of a servant, the father, so he didn't come back entitled, like, I'm your son, I should. And if you remember the story, so if the father had $100,000 and he divided, he said, all right, $50,000 is yours and $50,000 is your son, the older son. And when the boy came back and squandered his $50,000, the father didn't enable that by saying, well, now you get $25,000 more and I'm taking $25,000 from the older son. If you remember the story, he said, to the older son who was upset about this, he said to the older son, everything I have is yours. So this son was not getting any more inheritance. He wasn't getting any more of the father's money. He took it all. Those were the consequences. But he could still have a relationship. And that's what the father was trying to say. There are consequences to what you've done, son, but you are still my son and you are welcome in the family. You are welcome in the family. Now, the older brother had a problem with that, right? The older brother. So I think what the story is telling is there is obvious sin of lavish living and selfishness. And then there's sin of self-righteousness and pride. They're both despicable. And God loved the younger son with the father illustrates the father of God. He loved the younger son with his mess. He let him make his mess and he let him suffer the consequences of his mess. There was no enabling. He didn't go rescue him from the pig slop. And the older son was also making a mess with his pride and self-righteousness. He was losing fellowship with the younger brother. He was losing fellowship with the father. He was having a bitter spirit. And the father spoke to him, but he had to do his work. He couldn't rescue him either. They both had work to do, and the father loved them, but let them both do their work. And that's an illustration of God the Father and a good parent. All right, one more question. My 25th anniversary is this week. We are separated, and I don't know if I should reach out to show I love him or wait for him to show he wants to recognize it. If I don't reach out, he will see it as rejection. I don't want to move. I don't know what move will make that won't be out of fear. So I think you need to ask yourself what would be, so I think this is a really important thing that we talk about in the class a little bit, is how do we have a loving response to someone if we still love them and we want to show them love without misleading them?